The year was somewhere in the late 1880s, the exact date lost to history. But the story of what happened that day near the Arbuckle Mountains became one of the most repeated tales in Indian Territory. Bass Reeves had been tracking a gang of horse thieves for 2 weeks, following their trail through Creek Nation and into Chickasaw Territory. There were 4 of them, maybe 5, depending on which version of the story you hear. They'd been stealing horses from ranches and Creek citizens, then selling them across the border in Texas. It was organized, professional, and lucrative. And Bass had a warrant for every single one of them. The gang knew Bass was coming. Word traveled fast in the territory, and Bass Reeves wasn't exactly subtle. When the most famous lawman in the West was on your trail, people noticed. Saloon owners talked, informants whispered, and the whispers always reached the outlaws eventually. So the gang made a decision. Instead of running, they'd set a trap. They chose their ground carefully, a narrow canyon pass where the trail squeezed between high rock walls. There was a split rail fence on one side, remnants of an old homestead. Scattered boulders provided cover. And most importantly, there were high points on both sides where men with rifles could set up and create a crossfire that would turn the canyon into a killing zone. Bass rode into that canyon at mid-morning, the sun climbing toward noon, his big white horse picking its way carefully over the rocky ground. He had a posse with him, 2 or 3 other deputies whose names have been lost to time. They were spread out, the way experienced lawmen always traveled in hostile territory, far enough apart that a single ambush couldn't take them all at once. The first shot came from the left, from behind a boulder about 40 yards away. The bullet sang past Bass's head so close he could feel the wind of its passage. Before the echo even faded, 3 more rifles opened up from the right side, and suddenly the canyon was filled with a thunder of gunfire. Bass's horse reared, and Bass threw himself from the saddle, landing hard behind that split rail fence. Bullets were smacking into the wood, sending splinters flying. His deputies scattered, diving for cover wherever they could find it. And the outlaws kept shooting, pouring fire down from their elevated positions, convinced they had the lawmen pinned and helpless. But Bass Reeves wasn't helpless. He never was. Even as bullets chewed up the fence around him, even as his hat was knocked clean off his head by a round that should have killed him, Bass was assessing the situation with the cold clarity that made him legendary. He counted muzzle flashes, 4 shooters, maybe 5. 2 on the left, at least 3 on the right. All of them focused on the fence where Bass was sheltering. That was their first mistake. Bass pulled his Winchester from where it had fallen, checked that it was undamaged, and started moving. Not away from the fight, toward it. He crawled along the base of that fence, staying low, using the sparse cover while bullets continued to hammer the position where he'd been seconds before. The outlaws were shooting at shadows now, at the spot where they'd last seen Bass, not realizing he'd already relocated. Their second mistake. Bass found a gap in the fence, a place where he could see through to the right side of the canyon, where 3 of the shooters were positioned. He brought the Winchester up, settled his breathing the way he'd been taught decades ago during his years living with the 5 civilized tribes, and started shooting back. The first shot took one outlaw in the shoulder, spinning him around and knocking him out of the fight. The second shot forced another to duck behind cover, breaking the rhythm of their fire. And suddenly the ambush was falling apart. The outlaws on the left tried to adjust, swinging their rifles around to target Bass's new position. One of them got off a shot that tore through Bass's coat sleeve, so close to his arm that it scorched the fabric. Another round hit the fence rail directly in front of Bass's face, exploding wood fragments that cut his cheek and drew blood. But the bullet itself missed completely. Bass's deputies had regrouped by now and were returning fire from their own positions. The canyon was a chaos of gun smoke and echoes, bullets ricocheting off rocks, men shouting and cursing. But through it all, Bass stayed focused. He wasn't shooting wild or spraying lead in hopes of hitting something. Each shot was deliberate, aimed, purposeful. Another outlaw went down, clutching his leg. Then another threw down his rifle and raised his hands in surrender. The ones who were still standing could see which way the wind was blowing. This wasn't going according to plan. They'd set up a perfect ambush, had the high ground, had surprise on their side, had fired at least 14 shots directly at Bass Reeves from distances where missing should have been impossible. And Bass was still standing, still shooting back. And now 2 of their gang were wounded and 1 had surrendered. They ran. Just broke cover and ran, scrambling down from their positions and sprinting for where they'd tied their horses on the far side of the canyon. Bass let them go, for the moment. He was more concerned with securing the wounded outlaws and making sure his deputies were unhurt. It was only after the shooting stopped and the adrenaline began to fade that Bass took stock of what had just happened. His hat had a bullet hole clean through the crown. His coat sleeve was torn and scorched. The fence he'd been using for cover was shattered in 3 places where rounds had hit within inches of his body. There was a shallow cut on his cheek from wooden splinters, but he hadn't been shot, not even grazed. 14 shots, maybe more, fired at him from trained marksmen at ranges where accuracy should have been easy. And not 1 bullet had actually hit Bass Reeves's body. His deputies stared at him like they'd witnessed a miracle. The wounded outlaws stared at him like he was supernatural, something more than human. And Bass? He picked up his bullet-riddled hat, put it back on his head, and started organizing the pursuit of the men who'd escaped. They caught the runners 2 days later, found them camped in a creek bottom, exhausted and demoralized. They surrendered without a fight, and one of them, nobody recorded his name, asked Bass a question that would be repeated in saloons and campfires across the territory for years to come. "How?" the outlaw said. "We had you dead to rights. Perfect ambush. 14 shots, maybe more. How are you still alive?" Bass looked at him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "I reckon the Lord's got more work for me to do," he said. "Or maybe you boys just can't shoot straight. Either way, you're going to Fort Smith to explain it to Judge Parker." The story of the Canyon ambush became one of the core legends of Bass Reeves's invincibility. People said he was blessed, that God protected him. Others said he was just supernaturally lucky. The more superstitious claimed he'd made some kind of deal with spirits during his years living among the tribes, that he wore charms or carried medicine that turned bullets away. But the truth was probably simpler and somehow more impressive. Bass Reeves had survived 32 years as a deputy marshal in the most dangerous territory in America through a combination of skill, instinct, and constant vigilance. He never relaxed, never assumed he was safe, never walked into a situation without having already planned 3 different escape routes. When those first shots came in the canyon, Bass hadn't frozen or panicked. He'd moved, adapted, fought back with precision and purpose. The outlaws had been shooting at where he was, but Bass was always thinking 3 moves ahead, always relocating, always making himself harder to hit. And yes, there was probably luck involved too. 14 shots and not 1 solid hit requires more than just skill. It requires fortune, fate, whatever you want to call it. But Bass never relied on luck alone. He made his own luck through preparation and expertise. Over his career, Bass would be shot at hundreds of times. His hats would be ventilated with bullet holes until he had a collection of them, each one a trophy from a fight he'd survived. His coats would be torn and scorched. His saddles would bear the scars of rounds that came within inches of killing him. But his body? In 32 years and over 3,000 arrests, Bass Reeves was never wounded by a bullet, not once. It became his defining characteristic, the thing that separated him from every other lawman in the territory. Other deputies got shot, got wounded, got killed. But not Bass. He walked through gunfights like he was walking through rain, untouchable, unstoppable. The outlaws believed he couldn't be killed. Some deputies believed it too, and that belief became a weapon more powerful than any gun Bass carried. When word spread that Bass Reeves had your warrant, criminals knew they had three choices: surrender peacefully, die in a shootout, or run so far that even Bass couldn't find you. Fighting and winning wasn't on the list of options, because Bass Reeves didn't lose gunfights. The canyon ambush proved it. 14 shots at a man who should have been an easy target. 14 misses, and when it was over, Bass Reeves walked away without a scratch, leading prisoners to Fort Smith, already planning his next hunt. That night, camped under the stars with his prisoners chained to a tree and his deputies sleeping nearby, Bass examined his ruined hat by firelight. He counted the bullet holes. This one made 3. And thought about how close those rounds had come. An inch to the left, and he'd be dead. Half an inch lower, and the slug would have punched through his skull instead of his hat brim. For a moment, just a moment, Bass allowed himself to feel the weight of it. The constant danger. The ever-present possibility that the next bullet wouldn't miss. The knowledge that his luck, supernatural or not, would eventually run out because everyone's luck runs out. Eventually. Then he set the hat aside, checked his weapons, and lay down to sleep. He had prisoners to deliver and outlaws to catch. There was no time for dwelling on what-ifs or close calls. The job wasn't finished. The job was never finished. And Bass Reeves would keep doing it. Keep walking into gunfights and ambushes and desperate last stands. Keep surviving against odds that should have killed him 100 times over. 14 bullets in one fight, hundreds more across his career. And Bass Reeves never stopped moving, never stopped fighting, never stopped being the one lawman in Indian Territory who seemed to have made a deal with death itself. You can try, but you won't succeed. Not today, not ever.